What is up, world, and welcome to the What You Got podcast, where we talk topics A to Z and everything in between. I am Jordan Palmer, joined as always by Charlie Budd, and today, here it is, part 2 of our Dune special. But this was kind of what we were really building up for while we read the book. It was all about Dune, the movie, Denis Villeneuve's latest and some might say greatest movie installment. So many things to go over. The world is still, and by the world I mean the United States, is still just reeling over it, getting a feel for this new space opera epic. But we saw this together in person in the lovely city of New York.
We did.
What you got? What you got?
Oh, Palmer. Well, this is something I've been wanting to see for over a year, ever since it was announced, and then it was supposed to come out December of 2020, and it was delayed an entire year because of COVID, which is fine. But we finally see it now. We're finally seeing it, and I have to say, I loved it. It was excellent. It was such a good movie. It treated the book really well. I mean, definitely had some minor changes, sped some things up, and we can talk all about that. But overall, thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved everything from the visuals to the score to just the entire scale of everything from the city of Arrakeen, Kaladin, even the shots of Gedi Prime, the Imperial planet where the Sardaukar are. It's just it was Secula Secundus or something. It was just, the scale was insane. The set pieces were amazing. I just love that super modern architecture that really kind of shows not a highly advanced technological world, because they kind of outlawed AI and computers, but it still had that really sleek modern style. Technology was clearly evident. It really had a lot of that visual storytelling going on in the movie. So with that said, I just want to say spoiler warnings for all of you out there.
You're a mind reader.
That we're going to be talking. Tried not to talk too much, if at all, about the second half of Dune, because if you don't know, Dune, the movie, was only the first half of the book. So we'll try to confine everything into the first half of the novel, which would be the movie, or basically everything in the novel that's in the movie. You get my point. And we'll try to talk about differences from the books, things that we liked, themes that they kind of went for, and all that stuff. So there's your warning. Go see the movie. You should really see it in IMAX like we did, and it was an absolute spectacle.
Yeah.
Do not watch it on HBO Max. You can watch it on HBO Max for a second viewing if you want, if you liked it that much, but highly encourage to see it in theater. So, Palmer, I'm going to throw it back to you. Thoughts here on Dune the movie?
Well, Bud, I had finished the book not too long ago. Literally, I think it was 2 or 3 days before the movie. But I'd had enough time to buy into the hype. I'd seen a number of the trailers. I tried to stop midway through so I didn't see too much. But, dude, just given what Denis Villeneuve's done, coupled with the cast, especially after you told me who was in it after our last episode, I was super pumped. And so, like you said, I was curious to see, A, the scale, but B, I wanted to see the mix of something that's so prominent in the book as the philosophy.
Yes.
And I was curious to see if that would be translated into the movie, and if so, how, as well as the pacing too, because I knew this was going to be a 2-part movie or 2 films for the one story, and I wanted to see where they stopped it, but also what scenes they thought were important enough to keep in, and what characters would make the first half, and then who wouldn't and would make the second half.
And Dune is not all, and it's another thing with pacing is Dune is also not a very fast-paced book. It's a kind of a slow burn, it has a lot of, because it's a lot to introduce you to, and without and it's just, it takes a bit for it to really build. And we can definitely talk more about this later on when we kind of dive more into the details of the movie, but the first half is really kind of just setting up for the second half. So
accurate.
So that's definitely that's a challenge, and it was really interesting to see how they kind of tackled that pacing with an already notoriously slow-paced book.
Yep. But overall, dude, my thoughts, I really enjoy. I mean, there was a moment where I was just sitting in the theater. I was like, this is beautiful. This is this man is a genius who put it together. Just everything was working. And once again, when we started watching it through on the second time, we told ourselves, everyone, that we were going to watch it for 5 minutes, and we looked up and like an hour and a half was gone. So if that doesn't tell you how good the film is, then I don't know what will. So just buckle up for that. But dude, great flick. I'm so excited for part 2 too.
I know. I right now it's not green lit, but like it has to be. I feel like it's green lit in everything but name. Like Warner Brothers, you got to give it the green light, especially since, like, without spoiling anything in part 2, is like that's when like everything goes down. Like you can tell, for if you didn't read the book and you just watched the movie and you're listening right now, like you might be thinking, that was a good movie, but it just kind of it was clearly just building up. Like it ended weirdly, right? Like it just kind of ended in the middle. Like it literally just ended in the middle of a story.
It did.
And it's fair. I can understand that. I'm really curious for people who have not read the book to kind of see how they felt about it. I saw like one YouTuber talk about it. He really liked the movie, but I think one of the criticisms that he had was that, like, if there is no part 2, it just kind of felt like if this movie would kind of feel like wasteful in a sense. And I agree in that sense, but like at the same time, I also remember turning to you, Jordan, at the end of the movie. I'm like, wow, like all the good stuff happens in part 2. Like such a shame that people who don't know that won't know that. Like,
I think that was literally the first thing you said.
I was like, can't wait for part 2, because that's when it gets really juicy in terms of like all the good content that like Dune is kind of famous for.
Definitely. And actually, if you are listening and you did not read the book but you saw the movie and you want to share your thoughts, please do that with us on Instagram at Whatcha Got Podcast, Whatcha spelled WHATCHA, or on Twitter at Whatcha Got Cast, Whatcha spelled the same way. Yeah, but no, okay, bud, kicking it off from the very beginning.
Okay.
The first person to actually speak was Zendaya as Chani, and she was describing Arrakis. Do you think she was the right person to open up the film?
I think so, because it's clear that that's the theme that they're going for. Like her monologue has really got that, like kind of like the imperialist like theme that Dune has, and I think that's like definitely the theme that they're trying to focus on a lot here, is because in the book, like, yeah, I mean, it's clear if you pay attention to reading the novel, it's clear that like maybe Paul and House Atreides and like even House Harkonnen especially are not necessarily like good. Even like House Atreides might have good intentions and they might seem noble, but at the same time they like Paul and what they do is not necessarily like they're not really heroes in this story. And so I think Chani's monologue, which doesn't happen in the books, it's a good kind of like base to launch the movie off of, because it provides you with enough information about kind of the politics of the universe, and like what her monologue is like 3-4 minutes, if that, and it really gives you kind of an idea of the themes that this movie will take on. But what did you think about that opening shot?
Honestly, it reminded me a lot of kind of Avatar: The Last Airbender vibes, where Katara is just laying out everything that's happened. And it's so interesting because if you juxtapose Aang with Paul, Aang was literally supposed to be the savior, and he, lived up to the hype. No spoilers for Avatar, but then you have Paul, who's out here, and more questionable, as you just kind of went into. And it is interesting too, because I think that's something I really appreciated while watching the film. You see the Atreides as they're going to Arrakis, and you realize that A, they got the assignment from the Emperor, but B, they're really doing it to build up their resources in order to just become a wealthy family and be able to do more. So
and like
it makes them...
And to build on that, sorry to cut you off.
No, go for it.
To build on that is that like one of the first things that they say is that we need desert power on the planet. Like we want to take advantage of the Fremen, essentially the native of Arrakis. So
definitely.
It's like double on top.
It's
of
actually that's perfect too, because the language that Leto used was, we ruled Caladan with air power and sea power. So he's like, well, so it's just that element of power once again. Can't call them good guys.
No, you can't. I mean, like maybe like Leto Atreides, himself could have been like a really noble person, because I think his interactions with Stilgar, because I think, sorry, there's like a fruit fly. I think if you look at, like, if you remove all like the political stuff that's going on with like the Emperor essentially plotting with House Harkonnen to wipe out the Atreides family, maybe it would be different. Maybe Leto Atreides would still like wouldn't exploit the Fremen the way that they're setting up Paul and Jessica to kind of do. But at the same time, I think it would kind of go against like the wishes of Dr. Liet Kynes, who was looking to create Arrakis as a lush green planet. And she says that once people discovered the spice, people didn't want that for the planet anymore. So, like, I wonder how much pressure, like, Leto Atreides would have against the Fremen, who, want something completely different for the planet versus what House Atreides originally set forth to go there for. It would be an interesting, thought experiment. But
absolutely.
This is my thoughts there, but like, so what did you think though of like some of the what was I gonna say? How they changed like the Emperor's immediate involvement, because almost from the get-go they say like it's clear that the Emperor's involved in this.
Quite explicit. That was interesting. And so it's funny how many times, and I was thinking about the Rick and Morty, like the Rick's Must Be Crazy episode where they're going into like the miniverse and everything. And just the amount of giant ramps I saw going down in the first like 15 minutes of the movie was kind of funny. But they did it for the Emperor Squad, and he's like, Morty, wait, hold up, let the ramp go down slow. I love that. Like, so that's what I was thinking. But no, I thought it was necessary, I think, for pacing in order to bring up just the fact that the Emperor's hand was somehow involved. But to your point, something that you said, you could have done it a little bit more subtly in order to just kind of allow that same aha moment that the book did. Yeah. So specifically, there's a moment when Duncan, after having made contact with the Fremen, comes and talks to the Atreides and is telling them about, but that would have been an opportunity to maybe say, oh, I think I see, Sardaukar, who are the Emperor's little private army. Out there somewhere. But I thought it was an interesting point. How about you? What were your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, because for those of you who don't know, for context, in the book Dune, it's like kind of subtly hinted at about why not only the Emperor's involvement, it's kind of it's like a bigger reveal in the book in like the latter half of the book, although there's definitely like hints of his involvement very early on, but it's also very subtly hinted at as to his reason why. When the movie is very, very on the nose about it, I understand why they did it. Like, even though I think they could have not done it that way and cast suspicion. Like, I'm fine with the dialogue of Leto and Paul talking on Caladan about like the Emperor fears that we're growing too popular, too powerful. I'm fine with that, because it allows the audience, like, that is just quickly glazing over like what could be like 15 pages in the book of like, explaining politics, and they do it in like 30 seconds that, hey, there could be some darker forces at work here. The Emperor might be laying a trap for us. That is something that Leto in the book mentions over and over, that they know that Dune is a trap and they're going to go there anyway. So, but at the same time, as you mentioned, that like, yes, there are so many instances that they could have dropped in hints of like when, because like the problem is they had to introduce somehow the Sardaukar, who the Sardaukar were, because in the book they do that, and then they say later on, it's like, I saw Sardaukar among the soldiers disguised as Harkonnens in the book, but in the movie they're just there, they're just fully dressed up like they normally are,
in
and
their own
there.
colors,
their own colors, but they could have hinted at who the Sardaukar were without like fully just formally introducing them, with like you mentioned, Duncan coming back after fighting the Fremen and being like, they fight as well as, or even might even be better than the Emperor's own forces, the Sardaukar. Could have just dropped that line in.
Boom.
And then, like, or even somewhere else they could have dropped it in. Like, any time where they share, like, have a scene where Duncan and Gurney are sharing, like, war stories or something. And, like, they could have mentioned, like, fighting against Sardaukar and, like, the Imperial's forces or the fear of the Sardaukar somewhere. Throw it in somewhere. And then you could, like, devote time away from having to kind of craft these scenes where it's so clear the Emperor is involved, but I understand why they did it. I do understand that.
Absolutely. And when thinking about the forces that are employed by some of these families, you do have the Mentat, who include Thufir Hawat as well as Peter. And in the book, these people were able to have all these giant computational things, and they're basically the computers, but they're also these trained killers and assassins. And what I thought was interesting in the movie was that they didn't really have that second side. They weren't really killers. They were just there for logistical purposes. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was interesting. Like, I thought the Mentats would have a much more significant role because they do in the book, and the word Mentats not even mentioned.
Yeah,
it's not even mentioned in the movie. So people are probably looking at Hawa and going, "What's up with that guy?" If you haven't read the book, you're probably like, "What's up with him? What's up with Peter DeVite?" I don't know how he says his last name, but like, what's up with Peter? You're, like, the Baron's Mentat, and you're like, I don't really know what's going on, but, like, they just seem like they're logistical counselors. Like, they're just part of, like, the inner circle, and they handle something. Same with Gurney. They don't even mention his title at all. War Master. He's supposed to be the War Master. Duncan is the Sword Master, and Thufir Hawat is the Mentat, but also Master of Assassins, I think.
Yeah, so, there you go.
They don't mention their titles. They really just mention Duncan, and then it's like kind of like a side conversation. It's just like kind of dropped in randomly, but it's not like they don't go through all the titles for all these characters. And there's a lot of, like, subplots that they had to cut out. Like, it's really funny that there's, like, some characters that just disappear and you don't know what kind of happens to them. But in the book, I know what happens to them. And, like, it's just like, where do they go? Like, Gurney Halleck's character just disappears after the battle. Thufir Hawat disappears after the battle. But, like, I guess they wanted to save what happens there for part 2. But
definitely. And I'm curious here. So, what did you think of the portrayals of? We won't even go Hawat for now. We'll just go Duncan as well as Gallagher Kearney.
Gurney Halleck.
Gosh darn, I always mess up they're just so close in the alphabet, dude.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I actually, I'm going to just expand that real quick and say I think everyone's performance was excellent in the movie. I think every character did a fantastic job. I don't think there was anybody who was bad. I think the writing was excellent for a book adaptation. Like, that was super well done for a book adaptation, especially a novel so wildly complex as Dune. They did a really good job, and they did have to use some expository, like, just dialogue, which it's kind of like a no-go in movies, like you don't really want to do that. But they had to. It's too complex of a story, and it saves time. So overall, I liked all the choices. I thought everybody was pretty great for who they're supposed to embody. What about you though? What'd you think?
No, I really enjoy, like you said, all great performances from everybody. Nobody like phoned it in or anything. In terms of Gurney Halleck, I thought it's interesting. He was a little bit more. He's very kind of lighthearted in the book.
Yes, he is.
So he has those moments of just, humor, but then he can also become quite serious. I thought that Josh Brolin played him more serious, but honestly, I thought it worked for just the, especially knowing his background, that the Harkonnens had him in like kind of their slave.
I thought that was like Duncan. Was that not Duncan who was rescued from them, or was that Gurney? Couldn't remember.
I thought that was Gurney.
Oh, that was Gurney. Okay, I thought it was Duncan.
I think, because he mentions it in part 2.
Okay.
I won't say why. Okay. But then with Duncan, dude, A, I love me some Jason Momoa. But B, I loved how he played it almost as, while he's Paul's, trainer. He played it kind of like a big brother, and I thought that was really cool, especially kind of when it comes to protecting Paul.
Yeah.
And then you saw some of their just side moments that were super small, but he calls him a boy, and they keep it. So I was cheering him on, and I thought it was interesting. They gave him a lot more time as a character than I think the book did. But contrast that with, in the book, they gave a lot more time to Dr. Yue, and they didn't do that in the movie. So what were your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I know it was tough. I think for them, like, I think it's just like, oh, we're on a time constraint, you know. Yes, they did not give enough time to Dr. Yue. It's just kind of like he just shows up and does his role. Like, he does his very important role in the movie. But in the book, he's like, you see his internal struggle in the book. Like, you know, he doesn't want to do what he's doing, but he's like, my wife, you know, I have to do this. I have no choice. They have, you know, like, it pains him, and they give a lot more development to that character. So like when his betrayal is finally realized, that he finally goes through with it, like, it kind of like, you're like, ooh, no.
Yeah.
No.
Like,
so,
the tooth.
but I understand for the movie's perspective that they just kind of had to cut that short, because the thing you needed to know about him is like, they have his wife, and that's why he did this. That was it.
Definitely.
That's the, if you had a spark note his little story in Dune, that's like why that's it. And that's basically what they had to do. But like talking about other side plots that they cut out, Gurney Halleck and his smuggling operation, like, want to talk about that? Like, that's like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because there were some characters who were introduced in the book at this one particular dinner. Some who were actually involved with the Emperor and had imperial ties, and then some who were just smugglers that the Atreides were kind of trying to bring into their circle in order to advance their own family's power. And so by the end of part 1, I guess, in the book, as everything's going down, Gurney Halleck actually hops on board with the smugglers and goes that route. But it's not discussed in the movie. See, for me, I would have liked to know, at least give me a hint as to where the characters are going, because we don't know if he's dead or alive. And I know Paul, you know, eventually knows without knowing, or without someone telling him. But at the same time, I would have liked, as the viewer, to, because we spent time getting to know him. So, and even like Duncan, like, so just, I mean, we know what happens to Duncan.
Yeah, I know. Like, it was Gurney was there when the Harkonnens attacked, right?
He was sleeping, and then he was getting the guys to come through.
Yeah, no, but I meant in the book, like, he was there, right? Or was he already?
Yes, he was.
Okay. So like, it's just odd to me that they cut that very important part, that his relationships to the smugglers, because it's weird, because Jessica even mentions smugglers at the end of the movie. So it's not like that they forgot that there's smugglers, and that's a big plot line for Gurney, because I'm pretty sure later on that's where he's found, is that he's among the smugglers. And but it's just odd to me that that was not brought up at all throughout the entire movie, even though that's so central to Gurney Halleck's character's arc in this story. And I know the book itself doesn't play too much as to his actual journey, but like, you see the setup, him going off, and then you don't really kind of see it until like the end, the payoff. But up until that point, it's just, it was just weird to me, because you're kind of left in limbo for some of these characters, like Gurney Halleck, like what happened to him, and Thufir Hawat, like what happened to him.
He completely disappeared.
They both completely disappeared. You last see Gurney Halleck's character, or Josh Brolin's character, just running off fighting the Harkonnens at the battle, and that is it. That's the last time you see him, which was odd to me. So that's that.
Definitely. I was gonna say something else, but Thufir as well. I feel like we needed to learn just a little bit more about him, because he's well regarded not only by the Atreides but also the Harkonnens and others within, I guess, the galaxy. And he's gonna play an important role as the book continues to go on. Maybe they'll develop him a little bit more in part 2.
I think so too. I think they have to, because he does play a pretty pivotal role in part 2. Like, and it genuinely might be like a shock value that they might be leaving for kind of what happens with him, which is fine by me if they want to go that route, because we don't really see I mean, I don't know. It's just weird because we do see the Baron kind of recovering, and so it's just odd to me that like Thufir Hawat's well-being isn't shown, and then like it did seem like that was a little bit of an oversight, but I wonder if that was just more of like, okay, we just need to show their fates at the beginning of like part 2 or something, because we need to get to here in part 1, and we just don't have time for that right now in part 2. So, or for this in part 1. But I mean, there's still so much to the book. So like, I mean, I'm really curious to kind of see how they're going to juggle it all. It's definitely going to be a tough. But I know we talked about a lot about. Like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was just gonna say, I know we talked a lot about how like the book has differed and like the book differed from the movie, but now we can maybe go back and through each scene and like talk about all of that.
You are a mind reader again there, bud, because I was gonna say one scene in particular that stands out to me, not only in the movie but in the book as well, is the Gom Jabber scene.
Yes.
When, the Reverend Mother tests Paul in the ways of the Bene Gesserit, kind of just to see if he's a human or will revert to his animal instincts. What were your thoughts around that? I know we watched the entire, broken down scene.
Yeah, I honestly might be my favorite scene in the movie. It's up there with the entire Harkonnen raid on the Atreides. Like, that whole sequence was amazing, but just so visually incredible. But the Gom Jabbar scene, I think, is a very pivotal moment. There we go. With Paul, because this is where he's really his character kind of awakens a little bit. Like, it's even like hinted at by Leto when like Jessica goes and sees, like, he's not been the same since you brought him to your Reverend Mother. And I'm like, because it isn't. It's like where his powers start to awaken, truly awaken, and it gets further enhanced when he's with the Fremen. But so, like, I love everything about that scene. Like, I mean, I am going to borrow a little bit from what Denis Villeneuve said in
go for it.
Director Breakdown, but like the way the entire like framing of the shot, like the dark room, like the mysterious figure with the hood over her face, I thought that was a very nice touch that Denis like decided like last second to put the veil over her face instead of like, because he was talking about in that video that it was meant to originally just be up so you can see her face, because you have Charlotte Ramping, like, she's an incredibly talented actress. Like, why wouldn't you want to be able to see her face? But I think it adds so much more to this power dynamic that's going on between Paul and the Bene Gesserit, the Reverend Mother, and like, it's just honestly phenomenal acting by Timothée Chalamet and Charlotte Ramping in this scene.
Yeah,
when he has to like put his hand into the box and then like literally like, it's like, so your hand's on fire, or like you're gonna be thinking your hand is on fire in this scene, and just the entire way that they portray it is just so well done. Instead of like being really explicit about it, they kind of like flash imagery of kind of what he might be feeling, and I like that approach so well. What did you think of that scene?
Absolutely. No, dude, I agree. And specifically in the moment, and I know Denis mentioned it, but there is a second where Paul's hand is in the box, and he's starting to scream out and is told, be quiet. And then all of a sudden you see his face go from one of pain to just one of this intensity. Yeah. He's staring right at her. I know that's when the power dynamic is supposed to change, but I think once again it reflects that there's this thing inside of him that's starting to come out, and she realizes, oh man, I might have just messed up. So I thought that was such a, I can't even call it subtle, but it was just so well done. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And like you said, they had him go over, she used the voice on him too, which I thought that was interesting the way they did the voice. It was, I think for her, a mixture of just older women's voices, because then he was like, I want all my grandmothers to have a voice. Yeah. And so they cut short the whole moment in which Paul walks over like he's coming to. So you basically completely lose all of your inhibitions and your willpower while you're being overwhelmed by this voice. But dude, that was, and the fact that it occurred so early on in the movie, I think really helped to set the tone for the rest of the film.
Yeah. I mean, I love how they portrayed the voice in this movie. I thought it was going to be like difficult. Like, I was always curious like how they would portray it, but it was really well done. Like the way like they show how it would feel to be compelled by the voice. Like your mind basically goes blank. You lose like consciousness for a second, and like you're there, like you're transported. Like you went under anesthesia and you wake up in like a second, and you don't even realize it. That's what that happened. It's I thought it was really well done, and like he talks about how he does that in that director like breakdown of the scene where they like they turn off all the lights and do like a dolly shot out to like show consciousness being lost. So super well done.
Yes.
Super.
Any other scenes stand out to you there, bud?
I mean, I'm down to just like kind of go through the movie. So like,
okay, yeah.
After that, I mean, I love how though that scene. Additionally, going back to the Gom Jabbar scene, that like it flashes between Jessica and like Paul, like and how she is kind of like fighting. Because she's supposed to be a Bene Gesserit, just someone who works as like a shadow organization and like not really supposed to be like so, I guess, attached to her son in a way. I don't really. That's always the impression that I've got, that like she's supposed to be working more. Like her priority should be more for the Order rather than to her own son. But I do love that she's like reciting the Litany of Fear to herself, and like, it's so good. Love that quote.
One question I always had though, because the Reverend Mother even says you were supposed to have a daughter. Do they get to just control that? How does that work?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do get to control that because, I mean, it's the year is like, I think Dune is kind of supposed to be like what human potential can look like in like 10,000 years.
Interesting. Okay. Because everybody kept saying that. And I said, how is she supposed to? But now that makes sense.
I think the Bene Gesserit also have also like tapped in potential on how to like morph their like, physiology. So I think that is another thing that they can do is like determine.
It's actually very fair. Because I remember Jessica said that she knew she was pregnant after just a week or two, which obviously technology cannot tell us. Yeah. So there you go. Okay, that makes sense.
So that's it's implied. It's more implied in the movie, but which is another thing that the movie doesn't tell you is that computers and AI is completely gone in this world. There's no mention of it. It's just you kind of have to pay attention to the visual storytelling around you to know that. Which I think can also be confusing as to what is the significance of spices, because the reason that they use spice is because there is no AI to get them navigate through the stars. They have to rely on the human's mind using spice to navigate the safest paths.
Yeah, so. Which I didn't. You told me that after I read the book, but I thought they explicitly said that early on, so I said, okay, now people at least know kind of what the spice does. Yeah. So that was good. But yeah, so after that scene, they head out, go to Arrakis, and then they're touching down. What did you think of the changing of power from Harkonnen to Atreides, that scene where Leto and everybody just steps out for the first time onto the planet?
Well, I think it's a little funny that they had like the freaking organ pipes or whatever like going.
The bagpipes.
Like, what is happening right now? But it was cool. I mean, I liked it, but no, I mean I did like it. The scale and everything, all the ships, the soldiers, all that stuff. Like, it was awesome to see. I don't really have like much to say about like how that would look from like versus the Harkonnens. I think like Leto Atreides knows that it's going to be a trap, and that he's here to. He's got a lot of weight on his shoulders to protect his family, get spice production running, please the Emperor. Yep.
Yeah, that guy.
So, you can't refuse, and like it'll be tough. But what you think of that whole sequence?
No, I loved the muted colors, especially as you're looking out onto Arrakis for the first time. That contrast of darkness, that they're coming from the darkness into the light. Yeah. In reality, they're actually entering the darkness if you really think about it. And then, like you said with Leto, there was a moment that was so subtle when he looks back at Paul. And it's just this confirmation, like you said, I know that was going through his head, especially because in the book, what I think they were able to do, obviously a little bit easier, was just show how much it was wearing on him. In the book, they had these pills that allow them to overcome fatigue and exhaustion. So he was taking those, and he said he was really trying to hide that. Even Paul makes mention of his father was more fatigued than he was trying to let on, but he could still see it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good way to show that he knows what's about to happen and kind of come down on them.
Yeah, and it's also funny like how Gurney like has to like tell Paul's like, I don't think you realize what's happened to us. Like we've signed our own, we've signed a death warrant. Like we're you just like you have to be ready. Like I also don't think they expected the Harkonnens to attack so quickly. I think they were anticipating not a full frontal assault, but rather more kind of subtle. Like I think what the movie was trying to show was that they left us faulty equipment. We can't get spice production back up. The Emperor's going to have my head because I can't get the production. Like that's what they think the Harkonnens are trying to do with maybe some subtlety, sabotage of them trying to assassinate. What I don't think they anticipated was a full frontal assault by the Harkonnens. And I think the movie tried to portray that, but I don't know how many people would have caught that.
Definitely. Because a lot of times what they were doing was having Hawat just discuss figures. So when they just had the Emperor's envoy come and drop off his little gang of friends who, tell them that now Leto asked the question, how much does this cost? And he basically told them a lot of money.
Yeah.
So they constantly have that go back just to show the financial strains. Like you said, I think they were trying to subdue you into this false sense of, okay, they can't really afford to do anything crazy, so it'll be just espionage / something a little bit hurt him in the purse as opposed to physically like that.
And so that I think caught them off guard, and so they probably thought they had more time, which is why, because you see that they're already trying to plan their operations, and they even say to Hawat, it's going to take time, a lot of time to get the Fremen on our side, and so because they see the Fremen as an ability to basically match against the Sardaukar.
Yep. I thought they did a really good job of explaining that prior estimations of the Fremen were a lot smaller than the actual number that were on the planet.
And that also could have been a perfect scene to actually introduce the Emperor's potential involvement. If they say if the Fremen could be as strong as the Sardaukar, we could have our own Sardaukar on our own planet.
Yeah,
that can significantly increase our power, and maybe we can go after the throne. Like, it could have been a really good moment of power politics right there. So,
hey, Denis, if you need another consultant for that script, get Charlie Butt on this.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why they had to do it, but there's also ways if they didn't want to be so on the nose with the Emperor's involvement, which the book is not, then they could have done I'm just giving you examples of ways they could have done it.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, one scene I did like following that was the Hunter Seeker scene.
Yes.
In which Paul is just doing his training, and then all of a sudden you see this little device slide into the room set to kill him, and he has to remain perfectly still and then grab it. What did you think of that scene when you read it in the book, and then what did you think about its portrayal in the film?
When I read it in the book, I was like, oh wow, shit's going down. I was like, dang, dude, this things are escalating already. And even though I'm I'm pretty sure it's page 120 or 30 or something. But it was I liked it. I love that scene. I think was pretty true to the book. He might have been in bed or something, and he notices the Hunter Seeker flying. And it's been a while, but I like that scene a lot. It's just it's a really maturing scene, I guess, for Paul, because it shows how calm he is and sense of danger, and also incredibly aware. Awareness is heightened and stuff like that. So I really like that. What you think of it?
No, definitely. I think kind of to go off of the point we just made, I think that started to show a slight bit of the escalation from, okay, we're just gonna hurt you financially, to no, we're actually trying to kill you as the Harkonnens to take out the Atreides. And something that they reflected in the movie that they had a whole basically chapter on for Leto's perspective was they came after my son, and he uses that quote in the movie. And I thought that Oscar Isaac delivered that line perfectly. But I thought it was the perfect scene to show Paul's battle prowess and just his ability to stay calm under situations that involve pressure, but B, also the fact that the Harkonnens are pulling no punches, and they will kill even the 15-year-old, I guess, heir to the ducal position in order to advance their own position.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
So this now brings us to, because that scene, it's not much longer until I think the Harkonnens actually attack from there.
Definitely.
So what do you want? What did you think of the entire sequence of the Harkonnens' assault on Arrakeen?
Oh man, dude, I loved it because at first you see I think it's a really good metaphor for just Harkonnen versus Atreides. At the moment, they're basically pressed against each other, and nobody has an advantage, even though the Harkonnens are trying to catch them while they're sleeping. Mm-hmm. They even said earlier that the Atreides have the best fighters in, their known galaxy, and then the Sardaukar were like, "Whoa, hold up." yeah, I was like, "Whoa." Mm-hmm. But then, so it's equal at first, and then you see the Sardaukar just drop from the back, which was such a good shot.
And it's always so silent, and I just love how they slowly descend, and you just oh damn,
yeah, dude.
I love how all the Harkonnen are Sardaukar.
It's we got this now. We got this. Mm-hmm. And I loved that, like you said, just there were moments where the sound went completely out for a second, and you just left there wait, what's happening? I think it helped to kind of disorient you as a viewer, and then all of a sudden, boom, and they're blasting through the shields, and I love the use of blue until it goes red, where your knife can actually start cutting through. Oh, it was so well done. Yeah. It was so well done. And then I thought also they did a good job of cutting from the action on, I guess, the front lines to what's happening behind the scenes with Paul and Jessica being kidnapped, and then B, what's happening with Leto and Dr. Yue.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It was the spectacle was amazing. Them dropping I forget what they're called in the book, but the freaking nukes on their ship to just completely.
Oh, the atomics.
Yeah, the atomics on their ship, on
those
ships
are crazy.
And blowing it all up, and just this hellfire missiles raining down everywhere. It was just so crazy. I love the little touch of Beast Rabban beheading surrendered our Atreides soldiers to show the brutality of the Harkonnens. It was just so well done. And the whole I didn't even pick up on that, but the fact that the Harkonnens, as you mentioned, attacked them while they were sleeping is just such another dirty trick by the Harkonnens that but it's so in their character to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I loved the sequences with the Baron beforehand when he's basically staking claim over Arrakis, and he's it's my Dune. Dude. And you see him rise up, and it's oh, this guy is such a tool.
Stellan Skarsgård gave an absolutely chilling performance as the Baron Harkonnen, dude. He's one is a gift, not a gift.
Oh man, that was perfect. That was perfect.
And the score of the movie, dude, is just unbelievable. Hans Zimmer outdid himself.
He was really feeling it. He was on top of his game at that point.
Yeah. The theme for the Harkonnens is I think my favorite. It's just so the deep dark beats that they he's got, and so good, dude. So good.
Absolutely. And actually, I think he might have played that in the scene following the sack of the Atreides, in which they have Duke Leto just kind of laid up, and the Baron's eating dinner across from
Such a great scene, I have to add. It's just the Baron's a gluttonous, and he's I forget what he says, something kitchen, or just
oh my, yeah. It's this guy, will he ever stop eating? My gosh. Oh man. And then he has the hover, he floats over basically to Yue, and then here was something I thought was interesting. In the book, it was Peter who killed Yue, but in the movie it was the Baron. Why do you think they made that choice?
I think they wanted to make that choice to kind of really show how sinister and evil the Baron is, because if Peter did it, I mean, I don't know. I feel if Peter did it, it would have given off a different because Peter's not really shown to be that vibe. He's shown to be
true.
Calculated and cold and but kind of the right hand man to the Baron who takes all the ridiculous, the harsher, violent action. But Peter's just there to kind of advise him. So in like a way, like, yes, while he does do that in the book, I felt like it was more fitting in a way for the Baron to actually be the one to kill Yue, because that just shows the brutality that he leads his own house with.
Yes, very valid point. All right, I'm here for that, dude. Such a good scene. And then you had the tooth. What did you think of that when Oscar Isaacs just says something and it's mumbled, and then the Baron asks for clarification, and then he crushes the poison?
That's like I remember in the book I felt like it was more drawn out in the book. I felt like there was a lot more like happening, and but anyway, I mean, I don't know. I liked it. It felt pretty faithful to the book in that sense, like that, you know, he just like cracks his tooth when the Baron got close to him, and he just tried to take them all out. And I remember the Baron in the book just like freaking out that there was like poison gas and all that stuff, which for another weird reason, I always thought Raban was in the room with them when that happened.
Oh yeah, no, he was somewhere else.
But as we know, the Baron survives the attacks miraculously somehow. But it was a good scene. I thought it was like, for a momentary, you think it's probably a victory for the Atreides to just like, they kind of kill each other off in the end. But turns out it's not what happens. But it's a short-lived victory, because it's not much longer till you see the Baron again.
And it was smart, the detail, because it was the case in the book, but when you see him activate his shield, because that's ultimately what was the thing that saved his life.
Yes, it is.
If only he had it.
If only he had it. But he was a cautious and smart man, I guess. The Baron Harkonnen. Vladimir Harkonnen. Oh, man. Yeah, he was a little baddie there. And that was honestly, I think, one of the last sequences we saw him. Well, you find out that obviously he survives after that, but then for the rest of the movie, it's really focused in on Jessica and Paul and their travels through the desert. Yes. I'm actually really curious what you thought about the scene. So after they escape Arrakeen and they make it out into the desert, they set up a tent in the dunes, and Paul basically has his vision of, you know, the crusade that is coming. I'm curious what you thought about that whole scene and how that kind of compared to the books.
Bro, I don't know what it was about some of the sequences of the crusade, but just the way they I remember there was that moment where you see them on the ship. It's him, Chani looking down. They got the flow of the capes going, and the people are just cheering Atreides. And I said, oh man, that was chill. I thought that was such a good shot. And then for back actually within the tent as he's seeing this and he's coming to grips with the fact that he has this weird prescient vision. I thought that was very, very true to the book. I thought, interestingly enough, I know they obviously have some limitations given what they can do. I thought Paul had more of a freak out, as well as he understood what was happening to him a little bit more than it felt like he did necessarily in the movie. Yeah. But I don't know if they're doing it that way because we're going to have part 2, so he'll be able to explore that more with the Fremen. But that was my thought. How about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that sense. I felt like when he was having the visions of the crusade, he kind of like understood what was happening. Like whereas in the movie, he's obviously in the book, I think he is freaked out about it. Like he doesn't, but he's more freaked out in the sense he's just like the bloodshed in my name. Why are they doing this in my name? Like there's funny enough in the book, I'm pretty sure they're chanting Muad'Dib, but in the movie they're just saying there's like he actually says my father's name. They're saying people keep saying my name. They keep saying Paul, but like in the book it's actually Muad'Dib, and he's like the religion of Muad'Dib in his jihad, as the book calls it. But in the movie it seems like he was kind of understood that it was the Bene Gesserit's doing that he is seeing this, but at the same time he also seemed a little confused as to why it was happening, like why he was seeing this, like what it could possibly be leading to. Whereas in the book he kind of understands that he thinks that like some of the choices that he makes on Arrakis, like by even going to Arrakis, that like in him trying to survive is what's going to lead to that. And whereas in the tent, he's not really sure. And also, I felt like the dream was recurring in the book. Like it was something that was constantly brought up and something he constantly feared. Whereas in the movie, they just showed it one time. And I wonder if they're going to re-explore that theme again in part 2 as he's kind of becoming who he becomes without trying to not spoiling, because I just realized I said Muad'Dib, but they referenced it. No. They referenced it with the little like when he flashed the little rat, like a little desert mouse. But
and it's interesting too because in the book at that moment he told his mom that he would be called Muad'Dib, and then he told her what Alia would be called, and he revealed some other things that are to come, I guess, in part 2, but they kept it closer to the chest in the movie, and they didn't reveal all of that quite yet. So
they did reveal that Jessica is pregnant and that she gives birth. So
yes,
but they don't know what that daughter is, or who she becomes. So
absolutely.
All right, or even if it's a girl. Whoops.
Oh, true. My bad. Sorry, people. Sorry. It was just a baby. Yeah. You don't know. Gender reveal party. But I was gonna say something interesting that they really glanced over in the book, but also came in that moment. Something that bothers Jessica a lot is the fact that she was always a concubine and was never made the wife.
Yeah.
And in the book, they're told that there's a traitor among them, and Leto knows it's not her, but he
yes, you're right. I forgot about that entire plot. They know that someone's a traitor, and there's a spy within the House Atreides ranks. I completely forgot about that plot line, but continue.
No. And so he tries to.
Oh, sorry, didn't Gurney heavily suspect that it was Jessica?
I think Gurney did, and so did Hawat.
Yes, Hawat didn't. Hawat, I think, in the books hated the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah. He called them because she said they had a scene of just him and her, and she said, "Say what you were going to say." And he's like, "Witches." I was like, "Oh boy."
That relationship is not at all explored in the movie.
Yeah, true. I actually forgot that they didn't even have that scene. Yeah. Wow.
Well, that entire subplot of like them even knowing that there's a spy among them doesn't happen in the movie, and then the entire like hatred that Hawat has with the Bene Gesserit is not even explored. He actually seems fine. That's going to be interesting
how we do that in part 2. Yeah, dude. They had like because he like led her and Paul onto a ship, and they just seemed buddy. But so in the book when that happens, Leto tells Paul, if something happens to me, make sure your mother knows I never suspected her, and I'm sad I never married her. And then in the movie, they had him say, just while they're laying up, the Duke actually says to Jessica, I should have married you. Yeah. But I thought it would have meant so much more if...
Yeah.
But I know there's time, but goodness gracious.
I know. I mean, yeah, it would have been so hard for them to like squeeze that entire subplot in. And, like the movie was already 2.5 hours long, and like... I don't know, man. I hope one day like Denis just does like an 8-hour release of part 1 and 2, and like
I'm here for all of it.
Just like give it to me, man. Just like give me the Villeneuve cut. Give me the Villeneuve cut. I want to see him explore all those lines and plot lines and all that stuff. So I wonder if he shot all of that and just like decided to like.
I am curious too. Just to have to cut it. That would be awesome if he did. And then just had to shoot other scenes in order to make them fit the way it came out now, so that then he could go back and do his own like director's cut.
Yeah, I wonder if he did.
Oh man,
because like Jason Momoa was like, I want him to release his like 4-hour cut. I'm like, is there even a 4-hour cut? Like you're saying that there is, but like, is there actually a 4-hour cut of this movie? Because I mean, I want to see it. We don't know, Jason. Yeah, you know something?
Oh, I want to see it too.
I want to see that, but yeah, I completely forgot about that. I was like actually thinking this when we were watching it again the second time. Like, wasn't there a character who hated the Bene Gesserit? And I thought it was Halleck, but I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. But then I was like, oh, it's Hawat just now. It's Thufir Hawat who hates the Bene Gesserit. But
yeah, goodness.
To be fair, he has every right to hate them if you really think critically about like who that organization actually is or what they are.
And the fact that he's not only there mentally in terms of as a mentor, but also he can kill people. Yeah, he's pretty good at that.
Pretty terrifying.
He has all the right to do that or to consider that. But yeah, no. So after all of that goes down, then we're up in the desert. We see a sandworm. We actually saw one a little bit earlier, but how did you think that the design of those came out?
Pretty much what I imagined them to look like. Like just giant worms with big mouths and a lot of teeth. It's an
Alaskan bullworm.
Yeah, basically, I wonder if that was derived from Dune.
That would be awesome if it was, dude. I love the scale that they show when it's eating the spice catcher because that thing was humongous. And then its whole mouth just encompasses that device.
Oh, yeah, we completely went over, we completely missed the spice harvester scene, but that's okay. It's a great scene. It's just it doesn't add too much to the overall story. It just kind of shows the nobility of maybe how Duke Leto Atreides.
Yeah, and it introduces Kynes, who is the
and it introduces you more to the world and the worms and all that stuff. But which is all great and all. Definitely. Don't get me wrong; it's a fantastic scene in the movie. And it does happen in the book, so it's not just something they threw in there.
Yes,
they didn't have the time to add in new entire subplots. So that does happen in both the movie and the book. But let's talk about then. I guess we're almost at an hour already, if you can believe that.
I mean, I figured we would.
Yeah, it's gonna be a long episode, everybody. So buckle in.
Sit back, relax.
So let's circle back to them going through the desert. So, they eventually run into Dr. Light Kynes because Duncan Idaho finds them, which I think when I rewatched it, I realized that he found them because of the thumper or whatever the thing is that Duncan gives them. That's how he found them, because that's why Paul says someone's coming.
I didn't put that together around too, so that's good. That's
because in the book it's a little different on how he finds them.
Yeah.
Anyways, they get found, and then Light Kynes is with them, and I loved this upcoming scene when they're at the ecological center, because now you get a little backstory of the environmentalism that is which is kind of taking a back seat in the movie, but it is still there for sure. And I bet you they'll explore it more in part 2 when we kind of dive more into the Fremen culture. Because that Fremen were only in the background in part 1, even though they're going to be massively in the foreground of part 2. But I just I love how they kind of talked a little bit about the environmentalism that is going on, and and I love the line where nobody wants Dune to be a lush planet because of its resources. They don't care about our well-being, which I think is a perfect commentary on modern imperialism, which is what the book kind of is at the same time. But I loved the sequence where the Fremen are gathering around, talking about Paul, and he's oh, I don't think he's the Mahdi or whatever, and then they just hear the slightest sound, and it's the Sardaukar, and then they just freaking, and it just goes silent. The movie just goes silent, and they land down there, and it's such a good shot. I loved everything about that shot. The cinematography was so amazing, and they they cut back to where they had their water tea kettle, whatever it was, just it's in the sand now, and it's just oh shit, what's gonna happen?
Yeah, dude,
I just love absolutely that. I love that scene. What'd you think?
No, once again, I love what he's doing with the Sardaukar, and I'm hoping it comes back through in I guess part 2. But just like you said, just the sound cut, and then just there's it almost makes them more ominous, and there's just this level of brutality they have. The second they land, people start dying, no matter what. So they start taking, and something subtle that I'd forgotten about was initially Paul had a dream about Duncan A finding the Fremen, but B, he said you died, and in that you don't see Duncan, but you see this little bug. Yeah. And then fast forward to this scene, you see Duncan literally reaching out for the same bug. Yeah. And that should have been the cue, something's about to go down.
I actually didn't make that connection when I was watching the movie. Both times I did not make that connection, but glad you picked up.
I got it the second time around. Thank you. Glad you picked up. But no, dude, that was... And then, okay, so scene keeps playing out. People are dying. Paul is...
I just want to say I love how the Fremen, burst out of the sand. I love that ambush, dude.
Dude.
That was so sick. And that's something that they repeatedly show that they do, is that they come out of the sand. Which, is that a detail in the book? I can't remember.
I don't think so. And also they showed initially early on in the movie Chani and the Fremen attacking kind of the spice as they're like mining spice. And I was trying to remember if that happened in the book. I know that they obviously butt heads and whatnot, and that the Sardaukar and the Harkonnens are tasked with finding them and killing them. But at the same time, I don't remember them being so direct in their attacks against the Harkonnens. / they had weapons that took out those things. So I don't know. Actually, that could be a flash forward, and maybe I'm going crazy. But
I don't remember if that. I mean, I remember like them mentioning that, like, we've had a lot of battles with the Harkonnens over the 80 years that they've been on our planet. So it could have been just like one of those that they kind of took little creative liberties with. But I don't recall that specifically happening, like that sequence at all. But I mean, I know that they have mentioned in that book that we've had battles with the Harkonnens and all that stuff. But because also the Harkonnens thought there was only 50,000 Fremen.
Truth.
So there's way more.
There's millions. Yeah. But I loved I hated it, and I love the moment when Kynes realizes what's happened. They all do. And of course, my man Duncan turns around, hits the button to close the door and seal them off so they can escape. And he puts on his grown man pants and goes and takes out some Sardaukar.
Yep. Takes him out. Sacrifices his life to protect his Duke. Protect his boy.
Dude. Yeah. I felt that. When you just said that, I felt that. Because he was down, and then he got back up. Took out some more.
Took him out. And then they split up to go find the Fremen Kynes. He's going to ride a worm. And
what did you think about them kind of starting to introduce that at that point? Because it did not happen like that in the book.
No, that didn't. I thought it was a good kind of foreshadowing for what will happen in part 2, even though they kind of more explicitly state that in at the very end of part 1, which it actually turns out it was not Stilgar, because you see him quite literally in the scene. I watched it again. I'm like, okay, it's not Stilgar. I don't know who it is then. Who's riding the worm at the end of part 1?
Random Fremen number 1.
But I guess they all can kind of do it. It's part of their culture to ride worms. So, because it's not like the leader will do it. It's like they all do it. So,
I think at age 12 you have to ride one to be considered a full-fledged Fremen. So, yeah,
it's pretty wild. Their culture is so fascinating. I can't wait to
see
it more explored in part 2 of the movie.
Definitely. And something I thought that was interesting for the Kynes sequence, she got the hooks out. She's about to go, and then gets run through from the back by the Sardaukar. And I swear I saw water come out.
Water.
Okay. And so, I thought that was good to show. We'll reinforce that's what the still suits are containing. But B, something I noticed about the film was that there was that lack of blood. I know we talked about it.
Yeah, that's actually kind of one of the criticisms I could have of the movie, is that some of the action pieces just felt like I don't know, almost too fake in a sense. It's just. I hate to say that. Because the choreography was fantastic, but it really stood out to me was when at the end of the movie, Paul versus Javis, when Paul has to, it just felt like, there was this, it was silent and they were fighting, and then there was music playing, and then all of a sudden it's just kind of over in a very non-climactic finish, because the movie didn't have a lot of blood, and honestly, just the slightest tweak on sound design with the fighting probably could have made it felt a little bit more authentic, hearing the thuds, the stabs, and all that stuff, because it felt a little almost too quiet, especially when they're not using shields. The shields, they had the effects, and you could tell, and I don't know. That's my thoughts on just.
Dude, completely fair. Honestly, what they could have done with that shot is, because the way they had it, so for those of you who know, for context, essentially, Paul and Jessica get found by the Fremen. first they're gonna fight, but then they realize that they could be on the same side. So Stilgar, the head of the Fremen, says that he's gonna basically ensure their protection. But somebody who Paul disarmed, Javis, was upset about that, so he challenged him in their ancient ritual to one-on-one combat, fighting to the death. And so Paul has never killed a person, but he must fight this man. And so as they're fighting, Paul shows hesitation, and he asks him if he wants to yield, but he refuses to. And so Paul gives him a couple chances, and eventually you see it. Chalamet makes that. They have to take the moment in which his face kind of changes and he internalizes what he has to do. But then, as opposed to stabbing in the front, he sidesteps him and stabs him through the back. Yeah. And so I thought that they could have had it in such a way that he got him in the front so that he could have made eye contact. I think it would have been so much more impactful for him if he had made eye contact with them. And you don't have to show the hand going in. You can literally just show the upper part so that you can imply that he ran him through. And then so that Paul can see it. Because in the book, when that happened, Jessica said, how does it feel to be a killer? Because she didn't want Paul to come to revel in killing. And so I thought that could have been just an easy way to, and based on his reaction, to show that it's something Paul's hesitant to do, but is willing to do at the same time, and still kind of show the more violent ending for Javis there.
And also, in the book, it's not that he wanted to spare mercy to Javid, it's that he was slow because he was used to fighting with shields.
Also true.
And so they changed it a little bit, like to say that, Paul's never killed anyone before, which is true, but in the book, like, he was doing it more because he was used to fighting with shields where you have to go slower, which is hard to portray in the movie. I think a lot of people were confused. There was one reviewer I was watching about who never had read the books, loved the movie, but he was like, I just didn't understand the point of the shields. And I'm like, it's because, well, that's why the shields are the reason that they don't use guns, essentially.
Yes. Because, and it's interesting when Paul's in the training room with Gurney for the first time, you see him with the sword and he touches his hand like with the sharp part, and it goes blue, and then he turns it to the side and it goes red so he can get it through. And you'll see as Momoa was fighting when the Harkonnens were taking them, he was going slow, turning the blade, and then he would be able to turn it and slice through. So
it's really subtle. You have to pay a lot of attention to it, but like it's hard to, without using like expository dialogue, to really kind of like you realize what that is doing.
Absolutely.
But, so I understand they didn't want to take that direction in case people just like completely missed it, but it also would have been a good opportunity to highlight why, like, how shields worked. But at the same time, it was at the very end of part one, and the Fremen don't use shields, period. So it just doesn't matter. So I understand.
Shields attract worms, too.
Shields attract, which they do say in the movie. Because Light Kinds is like, shields are a death trap out in the desert. They attract the worms, the vibrations, all that stuff. Which is interesting because they have the shield wall and like.
I was wondering that same thing. I was like, is it just so big that the worms like I can't mess with that?
Maybe it's just not worm territory.
Okay, that's true. That's true.
Could have been.
I get
Could
that.
have been. Probably have to go out to worm territory to
deep in the desert.
Deep in the desert to some of the worms. But yeah. So. I think, is that the whole movie? Is there anything specific?
I'm trying to think.
Like, I know we went through a lot, and you're probably thinking, well, that doesn't sound like a long of a movie. It is long. It's a long movie. There's a lot going on, and a lot of it is really just building up for part two. With that being said, without spoiling too much of what happens in part two, Palmer, what are you looking forward to the most in part two?
I'm looking forward to the evolution of Paul. I think that, especially the way they portrayed him now, he's slowly starting to get a hold of his abilities, but it's going to be such a difference in the second part, or movie 2, and I'm so fascinated to see how Chalamet plays that, because it's almost going to be a different character.
Yeah,
almost.
and I think Chalamet can pull it off, because he's already showing like the subtleties of kind of changing, and it'll be interesting to kind of see how they tackle some of the themes of part two. Because I know in part one, actually, it was a little bit more on the nose of like, maybe Paul's not the great guy kind of thing. When he talks to the Lake Kinds and says, with the snap of my fingers, I can turn Arrakis into a lush planet. Like, if I'm the emperor and all that stuff, like, you can tell that his motivations are rising to be bringing his house back, revenge in a sense. And he'll go through all of this. And he's like, my path is in the desert. I can see it, the future, and like the future. But yeah, no, I am super excited for his evolution in the second part, because that was my favorite, like one of my favorite parts of the book. I mean that is the story of Dune at the end of the day. It's like the evolution of Paul into what he becomes. And then it's also, I'm really excited to see more of the Fremen and the Fremen culture, kind of like finally seeing that all like visualized. Like Zendaya's character is like a headliner in the movie, but she's in it for the last 15 minutes. I loved how part 1 though like teased audiences with events in part 2.
Yes. I'm fascinated to see. I'm sure they're gonna reuse that too. But I thought for a second as we were watching those that they had already recorded some of part 2. So I'm fascinated.
Well, in a way they did. In a way they did.
Oh yeah, true. In a way they did. In a way they did. So I'm fascinated to see that. And I'm also curious to see if there was anything that they might have filmed for part 1 that didn't make it that they used for part 2.
Oh yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I want to really like see like any behind the scenes. I want to see everything like regarding like, you know, what his plan was, his vision. You know, I just want to see it all. It's not probably going to come out for a couple of years about like what was cut, what wasn't, and all that stuff. But I will be excited for that. And I'm just excited for like, you know, the big battles in part 2, especially, you know, the ending. It'll just be just amazing to see how it all works out. And I wonder if people are going to crave to see Dune's other books adapted.
Yeah, that's because nobody's ever tried to take that on. I don't think, at least in a movie. They've done like miniseries and whatnot for that.
It'll be interesting. I wonder if this could be the franchise starter of like a truly great science fiction. Or there's a lot of books though, and they can maybe do the first 3 because that's like that's like, you know, a trilogy of its own kind of story, and then the last like 3 books are completely like new characters essentially. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, kind of what happens from here. But I am beyond excited for part 2, and I hope it happens, and I hope that we can see it within a year. But I don't even think they've begun filming on it, so it probably will be like 2 years before we see Dune.
Yeah, I was gonna ask when you thought it was gonna come out. The next one was gonna.
Yeah, do you think 2 years is too close, or do you think it's gonna be longer than that?
I hope. I know that Avengers from Infinity War to Endgame was only a couple of months, but at the same time, I think they were filming concurrently, like back to back. So
they had the green light for both those projects, right? So
yeah, they'd announced it long before they actually.
So yeah, with this, they have to like get the green light. Hopefully, Warner Brothers, you know, after like. I want to actually let's look at how Dune's box office performance.
I was going to do the same thing.
40 million this weekend. Pretty good. Actually, Deadline says 41 million domestic opening after a near 10 million Sunday, highest for Denis Villeneuve. I have to say that's pretty good. And that's just box office.
Absolutely.
You're not even taking into account like because the fact that it's split, right? Split stream, like it's on HBO Max the same day was so stupid. Because you just did not get the true cinematic experience that Dune wanted to give you if you watched it on HBO Max. But I can understand with the times that we're in. But 41 million opening weekend, that's pretty good. It's already broken international box office records. I've heard that the budget plus all the marketing and stuff costs like 300 million. So, you know, like it's
we're almost even. We're almost to break even.
Yeah, I mean, it's already the most financially successful. It's worldwide. Okay, so it's made 47.4 million in the U.S. Okay. It made 40 million in the U.S. this weekend, but the film has grossed 180 million overseas, which makes it at 220 million globally.
220. Oh, so we're almost there.
We're almost there, but I mean, you got to make a profit, right, from the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think it will be. I think you're going to see that.
Definitely.
It's going to continue to be a success. I think a lot of people are going to go see it. There's a lot of hype around the movie.
And it's just kind of the movie to go see right now, and also a reason to get back to the theaters if you haven't gone in a while is to go see Dune. So, and I really do hope that it does Dune Part 2, because I mean, if they made a sequel to Blade Runner, you got to think they can make a sequel to freaking Dune, right?
Oh, especially because they're still part of one story, A. But B, God willing, the pandemic is way over in 2 years. People will be going to theaters regularly again. So if they invest in it now, I mean, they'll see it.
And also, it's also like you're releasing
future.
a movie in and still kind of COVID. So you got to take that with a little grain of salt. Maybe it could have been a huge blockbuster movie, and we'll see. I don't consider 41 million opening a flop. I don't.
I don't
consider that a flop. I think that's a pretty good opening weekend, and I hope that more people go and see it next weekend, the weekend after that. I will buy 5 tickets. I will go. I know my 5 tickets won't add up to much, but I will see it again in theaters if I have to.
Yeah.
Just because I want to see a part 2. I want to see a part 2. It needs to be done. Has to be done. Must be done.
Must. No, agreed. I'm likely going to go see it again in theaters.
Yeah,
so.
I want to see it again in IMAX. I'd be so down.
Oh.
I just do. It was so good. It was so good.
I know.
I know you're probably all listening to us being like, oh, wow, gushing about science fiction and all that stuff. Or Dune, rather. But, like, I love science fiction. Where would you rank it as in your repertoire for Dune at the end of the day? And, like, would you put it up there, Palmer, as one of the better science fiction movies?
Dude, specifically thinking about the scale that it has to cover, as well as all the different subplots and storylines and the philosophy, I think that was such a successful attempt at it. So I consider that a huge plus. And then just overall, great cast, great performances. Just overall, dude, I mean, yeah, it's up there. I'm honestly... Okay, I can't say that. I was going to say, like, it's better than Star Wars.
Whoa.
But
I think it's better than Star Wars.
I know.
I think it's better than Star Wars. I think it is.
Okay, perfect. See, okay. Honestly, just especially because it's a standalone right now, as a standalone film, knowing where it's going to go, I'm fully excited for part 2, but I fully appreciate part 1.
Yeah. It's good.
Dude.
I could watch it all day if I want, because it's on HBO Max, and I can just watch it as many times as I want. So it's such a good movie.
Yeah.
But is there anything else you want to add, Palmer? Dude.
I do, but maybe it's better to wait till part 2 comes out, because I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah.
So with that, I will say, please, if you haven't seen this film, hopefully you have, because you're listening to this right now, but if you haven't, go check it out. It's awesome. And I'm so hoping it comes out in less than 2 years, but we'll see.
Yeah. I know. I'm praying that, 2 years, like December or like October 2023. God, that sounds so long. To come out. Like, I hope Warner Brothers greenlights the project and they can just get right back into it. Like, let's go. We're gonna go start filming in like freaking January or something, and just work on it. Like, please. But yeah,
help us.
I'm excited. I hope they greenlight the project. Go see it if you haven't, or please see it in theaters. And
yes.
Anyways, that has been our show. Thanks so much for listening. I'm your host, Charlie Budd. Joined with me, as always, is the wonderful Jordan Palmer. We are the What You Got podcast. You can listen to our episodes every single Monday evenings. Be sure to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts, and make sure to follow us on social media. Palmer, why don't you hit him one more time with the...
All right, one more time. You can follow us on Instagram at Whatcha Got Podcast, Whatcha spelled WHATCHA, or on Twitter at Whatcha Got Cast, Whatcha spelled the same way.
And please let us know what you thought about the movie if you've seen it. And that's been our show, and we'll see you guys next week.